It's a biopic on a grand scale. It's about one of the greatest artists ever in the history of the world, Amadeus. But is this really about Mozart? Sort of, but I don't think it's completely about Mozart. Let's talk about why that is, reviewing and analyzing this great movie, coming up next. Amadeus is a 1984 movie directed by Milos Foreman, written by Peter Singer, who wrote a play. Then he wrote a screenplay starring Tom Hulce as Mozart, and then the great performance here by F. Murray Abraham, who won an Oscar for this role. This won the Oscar for Best Picture, and while not all Best Picture winners are actually that great, I still think this movie is quite good. I've loved this movie throughout my entire life. One of the very few movies I can say, as a kid I loved it, as a teenager, as a college student, and so on and so forth up till today. I just watched it. I still really like this movie. Obviously, one thing that makes this movie great is the music. It's all Mozart. It's all Mozart's soundtrack. And of course, all of the music used in it really is chronological, almost, going through Mozart's life from beginning to end, almost, and using the music he composed at first and then later in his life, sort of. If nothing else, people watch this movie and will be inspired to listen to Mozart. But this movie is so influential that way, it will get you in again and yet again to Mozart's absolutely great and transcendental music.
Now for the real fire. Strings in unison. Ostinato on A, like this. Next measure's rising.
Second thing great about this movie, the operas. All of the staging of the operas is absolutely fantastic. Great lighting, mostly candlelit, I think, although I think they use other kinds of lighting. But the operas are great, and they go through Mozart's operas, Marriage of Figaro, Don Giovanni, and Magic Flute, and so on, and even the Salieri operas. And so they are the star of the show. This is a humongous musical production. You can claim, I think, that this is even a musical. Not exactly what you would think a musical is, but it does have so much music in it, so much singing in it, that breaks into the plot that I think, it could be considered a musical. And it's so wonderful to see the recreation of the late 18th century Viennese opera setting. Now, what's this movie about? First, before I get into that, I know what some of you are going to do in the comments. You're going to correct me about my historical accuracy or talk about this movie's historical accuracy. Let me tell you, I don't think this movie has anything to do with history, although the sets and the costumes and a number of things like that are trying to be realistic. I don't think this is depicting Salieri's life, Mozart's life, mostly accurately. I think a lot of things are off. I already know that. If you want to talk about it in the comments, go ahead, great. But I think this movie is about other matters besides the history or biography aspect of Mozart or Salieri. The movie uses these two historical characters to talk about a number of other issues, one of which is two different musicians, composers, creators, and their rivalry. Mozart doesn't know he's in a rivalry. He doesn't need to be. But Salieri sees himself as a rival, and he is a hypocrite, very nice and kind on the surface to Mozart and his family.
Let me offer you some refreshments. Do you know what these are? Capezzoli di Venere, nipples of Venus.
Here you have one established musician or artist who's a patron of the Emperor Franz Joseph. Salieri's got it good as the court composer. Lots of money, lots of acclaim, very popular in his own day, according to this movie. Mozart's trying to break in with something new. He's creating new things, new forms. As a man, as a person on the ground, he's a vulgar sort of character. He doesn't belong in the upper echelon of Viennese society, but his music does. In fact, it transcends that society. You have this very interesting contrast then of the vulgar man, as Mozart calls himself, with his ethereal, transcendental, glorious, universal music.
Will you marry me, yes or no?
As a composer who's bringing in the new, he's a threat, in a way, to the established composers, to their cabal, and to the emperor's laws about what kind of music that you can make. Can you have ballets in your operas, for example? Do you have too many notes in your music? Is it offensive to the taste of people because of the things it's using in its story. For example, the use of the harem in Marriage of Figaro. So Mozart is the new breaking into the old, but he can't ever get there, and one of the boundary keepers, is Salieri, the jealous, envious musician who nevertheless loves Mozart's music.
An excellent effort. You have shown us something quite new tonight.
It is new. It is, isn't it, sire?
Yes, indeed.
Thus, Mozart has money trouble. Throughout the movie, you see him struggle to find money, his wife trying to get money for him. Not just that he's impractical, spending too much money, more than he takes in, but also just trying to get a good-paying gig to help his household out. That struggle for the artist is always there, whether you have patrons throughout history or coming into the 18th and 19th century, and then the 20th century especially, the demos, the people, the masses, who are the paying customers, and thus, in effect, the patrons of artists. How are artists, great artists, in fact, going to get money? Sometimes they're underappreciated, and nobody will be their patron, or their patrons don't pay him enough. And, Mozart has all of these problems. He's going to write for the court at one point, but he's kept out because of the cabal. That's one of the reasons. Another thing going on is he's going to write for the populist operas, which is great. It's really well done here, but can he compose for them as well? So the question of, will the powers that be, the state as it were, at this point, are they going to be Mozart's patrons? Will people be Mozart's patrons? Maybe neither. So thus the struggle of the new, the fresh, the interesting new perspective coming in and breaking in, trying to establish itself of being kicked out or kept out by the powers that be, whatever those are.
How shall one say, Director?
Too many notes, Your Majesty.
Exactly. Very well put. Too many notes.
I don't understand. There are just as many notes, Majesty, as are required, neither more nor less.
Well, my dear fellow, there are, in fact, only so many notes the ear can hear in the course of an evening.
Salieri, of course, this is his story. Amadeus, the title, yes, that's part of Mozart's name, but it also means, in the Latin, various ways to translate it, lover of God, beloved of God, depends on how you use the word. I think this title refers to Salieri, a man who wrestles with God himself. A man who says, I wish God would answer my prayers, later in the movie, is deriding God for giving all of these great talents to a vulgar man, Mozart, when Salieri wants them so badly and has asked for them and has been a good boy, as he puts it, been virtuous, chaste, humble throughout his life, doing a lot of work. He has a hard work ethic. But God, he says, doesn't bless him with the gifts that Mozart has gotten. Therefore, he's angry at God.
You and I. Because you choose for your instrument a boastful, lustful, smutty, infantile boy, and give me for reward only the ability to recognize the incarnation. Because you are unjust, unfair, unkind. I will block you. I will hinder and harm your creature on earth as far as I am able.
This is a movie, as you see then, about Salieri's relationship with God. He is loved of God. He is given great talents, great abilities, and the position of court composer. Almost 99% of humanity would love to be in his position at this point in time, and yet he can't stand where he's at, given Mozart's gifts and Mozart's glorious talent. He's envious of that, even though everybody almost would be envious of him. Thus, the movie is, about Salieri in part. The frame narrative here is Salieri, old in an insane asylum, confessing to a priest about his life and him actually, spoiler alert, killing Mozart off, or so he thinks. Throughout the movie, then, the frame narrative breaks in, and you see the much older Salieri talk to this priest who has never heard Salieri's music but knows Mozart's really well, proving to us that Salieri ought to be jealous of Mozart, who continues to be and will be very famous, whereas Salieri's music falls into the dustbin of history and he's quickly forgotten, even though he was popular and famous in his own day.
What about this one?
Oh, that's charming. I'm sorry, I didn't know you wrote that.
I didn't.
The movie is very, very good about envy. In fact, it's one of the best movies about envy I can even think of. Salieri's desire to have Mozart's talents, but his then drive to annihilate Mozart based on the fact that he doesn't have Mozart's talents. We do tend to think of envy as wanting what somebody has, whether that's possession or in this case talents or ideas or a certain position in life, whether that be an employed position or something else. Now it is that for Salieri, he wants Mozart's stuff or his talents. But envy in the classical sense or medieval sense is also about getting rid of or annihilating those talents, and Salieri does that, so he claims, by trying to really kill off Mozart in this movie, thus killing off the talents and getting back at God.
I must achieve his death. What? His funeral.
I think we've all sort of encountered a person who to us is like our Mozart. Not that we've encountered someone who's the greatest composer ever, one of the greatest ever, but someone who is far better than us at something we love to do, whether that's sports, whether that's some kind of school discipline or academic discipline, whether that's making stuff, earning money, doing the arts. We have encountered in the hierarchies that exist in the world people who are way better than us, way more talented. And I think we felt the twinge, a lot of us have, of envy, certainly the jealousy that Salieri has, and thus this movie, focusing on him and making him the Amadeus who wants to be Amadeus. I think a lot of us, I certainly do, identify with him. Even if we have 150 IQ, we will encounter the person with 180 IQ and realize we can't think like them. We can't be as great as them in terms of mathematical calculation or in terms of writing ability. And so what are we to do? And we ask ourselves, why are we here? I think that's what Salieri is doing in this movie. Why did God put me here to write mediocre music? And he can't stand it. He can't reconcile himself with that thought. It's a bitterness that he has at the very end of the movie. And so I think for the viewers, for me especially, to wrestle with, am I Salieri? In what way? Am I jealous of other people and want what they have and I can't get it, so I'm just bitter about it? How can I change my life for the better? Because I think that's what this movie is getting at in part.
Mock me, laugh! That was not Mozart laughing, Father. That was God. That was God laughing at me through that obscene giggle.
I think you're supposed to look at Salieri and just deride him. He is insane. He is an insane asylum. The priest can hardly believe what's going on here. And I think Salieri is just an awful person. I don't mean the historical figure. I mean the person, the character in the movie. And yet the movie, while giving you this awful bitterness, offers you the sweet delights of Mozart's music throughout, from beginning to end. And if nothing else, people should watch this movie to enjoy and hopefully get into the composer Mozart, if not the greatest composer ever, one of certainly the top 5 or top 10 in world history. Music that transcends his day, his own self, his own desires. Music that strikes, I hope, all of humanity and, makes us all feel better about our lives and enjoy the sweetness that is creation, both creators who make stuff and what they make. So God bless Mozart. Thank you, God, for Mozart. What do you think of Amadeus, this video, what we've said, what you've seen or heard? I'd love to hear from you and your perspective, how you watch this movie, other things you might say, things this video missed. Please leave us comments. Please subscribe to this channel as well for more great movie content. Thank you, and have a great day.